This is for a bunch of our people that are absent today for the Model UN conference, right? And a couple other sport-related activities and stuff like that. So figured this would just be the easiest way to make sure everybody has all the information they need. So follow along, pause if you need to. All right, so the Federalist Era, all right, we call it this time because these two guys, Washington and Adams, are considered the Federalist presidents. However, one of the things we'll see with Mr. Washington is that he is technically neutral. He doesn't have a party affiliation at all because he doesn't like political parties. Smart man. All right, so his time in office, all right, okay, these are things that we don't need to memorize his dates in office, but it is one of those things that does help out kind of figure out what is going on between those years, right? That he is going to be that president. So we're going to start out with his cabinet. So we talked about before, the cabinet's not in the Constitution. It is an idea of Washington. It is what we're going to call a precedent. Our precedent is a example to follow. And he set several precedents, right? Cabinet's one of them. 2 terms in office is one of them. Being called Mr. President instead of Your Royal Highness, Mr. President. By the way, that was an idea of Hamilton that was like to call him Your Royal Highness. And he was like, sounds like a king. I don't like it. So, but in this first cabinet, we're only going to have 5 positions. All right, okay. The fifth one is kind of this guy down here, but he's not really. All right, but Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury. All right, that's why he's on the $10 bill. Jefferson is Secretary of State. That is dealing with international relations. All right, Henry Knox, Secretary of War. So if you've heard of Fort Knox, that's the dude. And then Edmund Randolph is the Attorney General. That's like your head lawyer of the country. And the other person that is going to be appointed by Washington and approved by our newly elected Senate is going to be John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He is the first one. He's doing all of the things. But since we're not going to see any court cases in this first time period here with John Jay, we are going to just see him as kind of an advisor to the president at this point in time. All right, now Hamilton. All right, Hamilton, we know, writes a ton. All right, okay, he's obsessed with writing. And so with him, he's going to come up with his economic plan. I have tried to make this very, very short for you guys to kind of figure out what is going on with his economic plan. If you actually read the whole thing, it's too many pages for any man to understand. All right, so our economic plan here, he's going to start off with a tariff and then this report on public credit and his idea of national debt. So this is the first time, but not the last time. We're going to talk about tariffs many, many times, all right? And we're going to be sick in the face. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. So anything coming into the country, there is a tax on it. This is going to create a national income, all right? Because we're bringing money into the country because we are taxing these things, all right? And he's going to call tariffs a protective tariff. All right. Now, with this, we need to write down what this means, right? So we know a tariff is a tax on goods coming in. What is that going to protect? That is protecting manufacturing inside the country, because if something's more expensive coming from Europe, we're probably not going to buy that item from Europe. We're going to buy the item that's made here in the United States. So it's protecting manufacturing. So let's even write that in. All right. Protects manufacturing, right, in America. Right? So again, this idea that we're trying to save and protect stuff that's inside the country. By the way, his political party that we just talked about the other day, the Federalists, they are going to be supported by manufacturers. So we get a little link in there. His report on public credit, he is going to be asking that the federal government assume states' debts. What that means is they're going to take the debts from every single state and bring it all together as a national debt. So we are tied together, all right? We all owe each other something. All right. So this is so we don't have places like Massachusetts has a ton of debt, and then Georgia has nothing, and then one state's taxing their people a ton, and the other state's not. This is to kind of cement together our union, if you will. All right. And then he's going to have an excise tax on whiskey. All right. Excise tax means sales tax. All right. Now, to have a tax on whiskey, this is to bring in more money, right? But this is going to be against some farmers, and they're not going to like it, right? We're going to talk more about that whiskey tax and then the ensuing whiskey rebellion later, all right? Now, as far as a national debt, he's okay with a national debt, okay? A national debt is good. It cements our union. It puts us all together. But let's look at this quote here. right, about this national debt that is related to Hamilton, right? So he's like, if it's not excessive, it will be for us a national blessing, as it will be a powerful cement of our union. So it keeps us together. We all owe each other, right? And again, this idea where we're going to create necessity for keeping up taxation to a degree without being oppressive. So it's the idea that we're going to be able to tax everyone a little bit, all right? Because we all owe each other money. So having a little national debt is fine. Having a large national debt, kind of what we have now, not fine. That would not be what he means by a national debt. He means a small amount. All right. Now, the last part of his plan is the national bank. All right. Now, with this national bank, it is not written in the Constitution anything about a bank. He is stretching his powers of the Constitution in order to have one, which is him using the elastic clause, right, in order to create a bank because Congress is supposed to be able to control money. All right. So, his plan for the bank. All right, it's going to be chartered or created by Congress. All right, we're going to have bonds, all right, where we can loan out money, all right, to have more businesses. And bonds in general, we're going to talk about bonds a lot, all right, okay, throughout the class, all right, war bonds, stuff like that. All right, when you get to economics, you'll talk about bonds. But it's the idea that the banks can now loan out money to people and then they can have a business. And then that's going to the natural impact of that or natural effect is increased trade, right, and industry because we're going to have more manufacturing. And then he's going to have like the basic things for a bank: safe place to put your money so people aren't robbing it, transferring funds via bookkeeping versus like taking gold from one place to another. That's not safe. People are going to rob you. All right. But this is passed as a deal. All right. Hamilton is going to get his bank, and that's going to be located in New York. All right, so New York, think of Wall Street as the head of U.S. Banking and that sort of thing in the U.S. However, he has to give up the new capital, which is going to be Washington, D.C., and that's going to be in the South, which is going to be on the borders of Virginia and Maryland. So he gets his bank, but he loses the capital because the capital kind of was New York before that. All right. Now, over on your notes, there is a little box, all right, that says Whiskey Rebellion. So, all right, for our Whiskey Rebellion here, all right, people in Pennsylvania are mad, all right, about this tax on whiskey, all right, okay, and they're a bunch of farmers and they're protesting. So if you look at this cartoon over here, this is our big bad government with their barrels of whiskey and the little farmers with their pitchforks being like, no, 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 don't take our stuff. So this rebellion is over something these people made at home because whiskey was what you did. You made all of your old grains before they would start to rot. You would turn them into alcohol because then that alcohol can stay forever. It's good forever. It does not rot or anything like that because it's already rotten. So they're making this at home, and this is reminding them of the Stamp Act, and that Stamp Act was stuff that they was taxed on stuff they made at home. So Washington is going to come in with his army to stop this rebellion because he doesn't want to have any rebellion like we had with Shays' Rebellion. So he is going to have 12,000 troops with him coming to this area of Pennsylvania against 600 farmers. 12,000 versus 600. Kind of overkill. But the point of this is it's the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, all right? And this is going to show us the Constitution is strong. So Whiskey Rebellion is the opposite of Shays' Rebellion. Now, I'm not going to play these in our video, but you can go to the regular PowerPoint, all right, to watch these. This is the first cabinet meeting or the cabinet meeting rap battle. This is about the National Bank from the movie Hamilton. And the room where it happens is about that deal on the National Bank. Okay, and we're going to pause for right now. All right, so Hamilton and Jefferson, we know, don't like each other. If you just watch that cabinet rap battle, you get the idea. They don't like each other. Also, they're creating these first two political parties. So this is the part of the notes where if you haven't started working on your Janus figure of Jefferson and Hamilton, this is where we want to get the info for this. Okay, this is most of it, right? Not everything, but most of it. So the consequences of Hamilton's plan. All right. One, we're creating this national bank. All right. However, he is a Federalist and he believes we should have a national bank, but it's not written in the Constitution. So Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans are like, no, you can't have that because it is not written directly in the Constitution. And it's not one of those particular powers. So this is causing this political schism or split of those first two political parties. So on your notes, you should already have this chart here. We want to highlight the items that we have underlined here. And I'm just going to go through real quick and talk about all of those. So Hamilton and Adams, so that's John Adams, are going to be our leaders of the Federalists. We talked before that the Federalists want loose construction of the Constitution. That is going to be the idea of using the elastic clause. All right. They want a strong national government, right? Okay. They fear mob rules. So that's why they're going to have some of these indirect elections built into the Constitution because they fear the power of the people. Because again, people at this time are not educated. We don't have public schools or anything like that yet. Industrial economy. So manufacturers, most of these manufacturers are going to be in the north or on the coast. So that's where most of your Federalists are going to be found. They're pro national bank. Well, people that have manufacturing and industry are using banks, so that kind of all fits together. And he's going to be pro trading with Britain. And this might sound weird because we just had a war with Britain. We should hate them, but we are more culturally similar to Britain. And so we trade more goods with them. So this is all about making more money. Right over here with Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans, him and Madison are on this side. Now, remember, Madison was the Federalist when it came to approving the Constitution or ratifying the Constitution, because he's remembered this guy that we call him the father of the Constitution. So that's why he's on this side. He was on that side before. But now, since it's been written, he wants to follow it strictly. So that's why it might seem like he has flipped sides. He is just refining his ideas of what we should do with this document. He's like, hey, I helped write this thing. I think we should follow it word for word. These guys are more for states' rights, right? They want to limit the power of that national government because they fear of an overpowering government. So those two match together, right? These guys are going to be pro-farmers, so agriculture, all right? And because we see most agriculture in the South, right, in the West, we're going to see most of those people are going to be supporting them. Farmers don't really use banks. So, and there's nothing about a bank in the Constitution, and they're strict constructionists. So they are not going to want to be pro-bank. And they're going to be wanting to favor France because we have an alliance with France from the Revolution. So what's nice about political parties back in the time is that they're complete opposites. All right. So that makes it easier to understand what's going on with them. They're always opposites. It has nothing to do with our modern parties because our modern parties have a lot of overlap and they're not nice and listed out like this. But this is going to be that really basic stuff of these first early parties. Now, for what is going on during Washington's term. So remember, these two guys, Jefferson and Hamilton, are in his cabinet. They're arguing all the time. All right. It's probably pretty loud in those cabinet meetings. So for foreign crises, we're going to start first with the French Revolution. We had an alliance with France during the war. All right. We had that made after the Battle of Saratoga, the turning point. Lafayette's going to help us out, and they're going to then bring ships to help us defeat the British at the Battle of Yorktown. All right. Well, the idea was that if then they help us, we will help them. All right. However, we don't want to have part in any of these wars happening in Europe. This French Revolution ends up bleeding into a war with Britain as well. And we want to trade with both sides to make money, but we also don't want to get involved. And so this is where one of these other issues comes up. Hamilton's idea in the cabinet. He says that our French alliance is invalid because the king is dead. That government doesn't exist anymore. That's who signed the treaty. Well, that makes sense, right? Jefferson's like, well, we had an alliance with the country of France, with the people of France, and that we should have this alliance and back them up because that was what we promised. And also, he's Secretary of State, so he's supposed to be the expert. Washington sides with neutrality. He's like, so he kind of is siding with Hamilton. He is saying we should not get involved. They're cutting people's heads off. This is the guillotine, the reign of terror, all of this other stuff. We should just not get involved. Plus, we don't have the money or the resources to do anything to help them. So it's kind of a moot point. Jefferson's mad about this. He will quit his job as Secretary of State over this decision. Now, to add a little bit more flavor to all of this, we have the second cabinet rap battle. All right, okay, this is all about that French Revolution. All right, and should we get involved or not? So take a moment, pause, go back to the actual PowerPoint and click on that to watch. Now, our next foreign crisis is Jay's Treaty. This is going to come back and haunt this administration later. All right. So our Chief Justice, John Jay, okay, remember, the Chief Justice, right, of the Supreme Court, they're not doing anything right now. All right. There's no cases to be reviewed or anything like that. So he's kind of doing other things. He's kind of branching out. So he is going to be having this negotiation with Great Britain over trading rights. So in this treaty, all right, we're going to have neutral trading rights with Great Britain, and then we're going to give them this idea of most favored nation status. So this idea, we're going to trade with them first before anyone else. So this definitely tells you that Jay is probably more of a federalist because he's pro-Britain. And then he is going to have in this treaty also that the British have to evacuate all of the troops from their forts. Um, they said they already did that with the Treaty of Paris of 1783, but obviously we couldn't enforce it because we didn't really have a military. He also is going to ask for reparations, which is payment, right, for all of the American ships or cargo that had been taken back when the British and the French were fighting. So basically, we were sending goods to both these countries, and then both of those countries were stealing our stuff that was going to their enemy. So with this, if we're going to be besties with the British, what country is going to be mad at us? The French. So keep that in mind for the future. Now, on your note page here, you have these two maps. Right? I connected both of these because they're two different treaties that we're going to have on the next couple slides. But what I want you to do is I want you to color in your rivers. Okay. Now, not every river. Two main ones, the Mississippi and the Ohio. So your Mississippi River starts in New Orleans. So I'd highlight New Orleans and it goes all the way up here. All right. All the way up this way. Okay. All right. It actually kind of branches off over here. And then the other river we're going to highlight is this one. It branches off. This is the Ohio, goes underneath the state of Ohio, goes up into Pennsylvania. Right. And the reason we want to highlight those two to start off with is to see how our country is connected. Okay, the other things I want you to highlight on here are going to be this area of Greenville, right? You'll see more details on another slide for this one, and this area down here that's part of Pinckney's Treaty. Okay, so Pinckney's Treaty and the Treaty of Greenville. So this is to see why these places are important. So our domestic things are going to be those two treaties. So for the Treaty of Greenville, all right, okay, there is all of these settlers are going out to this Ohio area, all right, and there's fighting happening with Native Americans. Okay. Same story we've heard many, many times. All right. And so we're going to have a bunch of battles and stuff like that. We're going to have this guy named General Mad Anthony Wayne. Mad here means he's crazy. Here's him in a picture in a painting where his troops are literally holding him back. All right. Okay. He's a little crazy. All right. But he has this big victory at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. All right. Okay. Here is what's going on at that treaty signing for this. And they're basically saying, with all of this, that the settlers are going to be able to, with the treaty that ends this war and battle, that the settlers are going to get all of the stuff that's in green on our map, right? The southern 2/3 of Ohio. All the rest of the area is supposed to be for Native Americans. Obviously, there's no physical line drawn in the ground, so this is kind of encouraged or suggested, right? Now, the reason we wanted to have our map back here where we highlighted stuff is because that area that is all going to be the settlers down here, if they are going to be farmers here, they can then take their goods down to the river. And then once they put it on the river, they literally are floating those goods down the Ohio, then down the Mississippi to New Orleans. It can be put on a boat and then can go up to the East Coast or to Europe. So that's why they want this land down here. It's all the farmland, so they can dump their stuff onto boats, let it float down the Ohio, and then to the Mississippi and onward. Right? Now, New Orleans is going to be the story of Pinckney's Treaty. So this is the area that's involved with Pinckney's Treaty, but it's really New Orleans that we want to focus on, right? In your notes, you can write New Orleans, NOLA, all right, okay, New Orleans, Louisiana is also a good abbreviation for that. But basically, we're settling the boundary between Spanish Florida and the United States. So the Georgia-Florida line, essentially, all right? And we want to have the right to use the port of New Orleans, all right? And we're going to negotiate with Spain. So this is a Spanish treaty, right? That we, the United States, are going to be able to use the port of New Orleans for 3 years. So have equal access to this port. Because again, this is at the mouth of the Mississippi River, and we can take goods to the East Coast or to Europe. So this is why we want to have access to this port, all right? And both of us say, hey, don't fight with the natives. Obviously, that's a suggestion. Nobody really goes with it. But again, this one is mostly about having access to New Orleans, all right, and having that access for the port, because then all that stuff come down the Ohio or down the Mississippi, all right, and then they're going to put all of those goods there at that port to go to wherever it is we're going to sell them. So this is all about making money. Now, Washington is leaving, and he gives a farewell address. All right, okay, every president is allowed to give a farewell address. It's kind of their, hey, we did all these things during our time in office, and here's the things we wish we would have done, and maybe some suggestions for the future. Washington gives us warnings, two of them. Okay, so our two warnings he gives us is be cautious of excessive party jealousy. Political parties. He's warning us that political parties are going to tear our country apart. Did we listen? No. The other one is both of these combined. He says, stay out of permanent alliances, all right, and don't get involved in European affairs. All right. So he basically said, if you want to have an alliance, all right, during a war, that's fine. But just like that alliance we had with France, we should not have it permanent. Once the war's over, it should be done. We didn't listen to that other thing either. All right. Think about World War One. World War One, all right, happening in Europe was this web of alliances, and then we get brought into it, right? Okay, from a different issue, all right. But it's that idea that these two things causes problems. We didn't listen about either one. All right. So another thing, just to kind of have some practice of a stimulus-based question, here is a quote from Washington's farewell address. All right. And then we have 3 questions here, right, to kind of get you to practice some of this stuff. So if you're listening to this for the first time, pause the video right now. So then I will give you the answers shortly. So pause it. All right, so hopefully you've unpaused and you have an answer for this one, and this one. All right, your answers are, for our concerns here, it's going to be France. Okay, that idea over the French Revolution, right? For this one over here, who is going to be the people who don't agree with him the most is going to be A, Democratic Republicans, because even though he's not a Federalist, right, he leans more with the Federalists. And our last one over here, right, this is a nice AP question. AP likes to have stuff like this where they connect 2 different time periods, all right? And so this one is the harder one. But our answer here is Woodrow Wilson with the First World War. So again, that idea of alliances, okay? So hopefully you did pretty well on these. Again, the first 2 should have been pretty easy because they are from the notes we just looked at. This last one is a little harder. You got to think outside the box. All right, so we got another video here. All right, so again, you can pause this here. All right, okay, go open up the actual PowerPoint and go click on those links. All right, but this is about who comes next. All right, okay, we got the king here, and the king is really kind of dismissed over the idea of like, wait, you're going to pick Adams, that little guy that yelled at me? Oh, good luck. All right. So Adams is going to be our next president. Okay. President number 2. Right. We are now going to have that 2-term precedent has been established by Washington. He stepped down after 2 terms because he didn't want people to think he was a king. All right. Adams is a Federalist. Right. He won the presidency. And then his vice president is Jefferson, a Democratic Republican. Wait, that sounds a little odd. That doesn't sound like that's the way it's supposed to be, right? So what's going on with this is that first place becomes the president, second place becomes the vice president. That's not going to work out very well. We're actually going to delete that and we're going to put this in. So first place equals POTUS, President of the United States. Second place equals VP. All right. Obviously, that is not going to work out very well. You can just imagine the tension. So for Adams here, all right, okay, his background, remember he was vice president in Washington. He was on the committee of 5. He's a Federalist, strong federal government, and he's going to inherit an undeclared war with France because of Jay's Treaty. So let's think back about Jay's Treaty real quick. Jay's Treaty. Britain is going to have most favored nation status. So that means France is mad at us. Okay, this is going to be nicknamed the Quasi-War. If you go on Wikipedia, this is, I took this from there because I thought it was hilarious. These are all the different names for this war, even the Pirate War. You're like, what? This is weird, right? But it's this trade war basically with France because they're mad about Jay's Treaty. So I told you it would come back and haunt us in the future. All right. So the outcome of this back and forth going on. All right. Okay. The French are stealing our boats. They're stealing our sailors. All right. We're going to try to negotiate with them. So again, France is stealing American cargo headed to Britain because they say it's contraband. So they're going to take it because it's against them. So we're going to send some diplomats, these three guys, Pickney, Marshall, and Jerry, to go to Paris and negotiate. These are our three diplomats they're going to meet. The three diplomats they meet are going to be called X, Y, and Z. So this is going to be called the XYZ affair. All right. We eventually find out who these people are, but at the time it was secret. So three French agents, all right, okay, are meeting with these diplomats from Americans to try to figure out how can we stop having you steal all of our stuff. The French agents refuse to meet with us until we pay a bribe of $250,000. Adams is not having it. All right. He says quotes of no, not a sixpence, which is like a penny. All right. Millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. He is willing to go to war with France because of this insult. All right. This is not good. All right. This video here is a funny little thing that kind of goes along with it. All right. Okay. If you want to watch. All right. Well, this is insane. So Adams is also going to then pass two laws, the Alien Act and the Sedition Act. All right. These are meant to be against the French. Okay. So the Alien Act is the president can deport anyone he deems a dangerous alien or foreigner. This is only for the French. All right. He doesn't care about anybody else. And then the Sedition Act, he says it's a crime to speak out against your government. Wait a second. I thought we were allowed to do that. And we are, all right? Our First Amendment rights protect us. However, this is for anyone criticizing Adams, all right? Adams is a Federalist. So the Democratic Republicans are the one criticizing him. The leader of the Democratic Republicans is Jefferson. So this is meant to shut up his opponents and his vice president. Oh, things just got saucy. They got spicy, all right? So the leaders of our Democratic Republicans, Jefferson and Madison, are going to then write the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions denouncing the Alien and Sedition Acts as unconstitutional. They say it violates states' rights to judge the Constitution. States don't have the power to do that. Only the Supreme Court has that power. But they were correct, right? Okay, definitely that Sedition Act of both of them is very, very bad and needs to be removed. So it is, okay? However, all of this hoopla of the Alien Sedition Acts, all right, okay, and violating our rights is going to make Adams very unpopular. So in the next election, the election of 1800, right? Adams and Jefferson are the main two guys running against each other. All right, Kay. And we're going to see kind of our electoral votes here, but it's a bit more complicated than that. All right. There ends up being a tie. So here's our electoral count. This is how they did it back in the day. All right. The tie is between Jefferson and Burr. Adams actually got third place. Well, remember, first place becomes president, second place becomes vice president. But since there's a tie, we got to go back to one of those reasons of why the Electoral College doesn't work. If there's a tie, the House of Representatives will vote for who becomes president. Well, the House is going to be dominated by the Federalists. Both these guys are Democratic Republicans. So they're like, who should we vote for? We don't know. We hate both of them. Well, the leader of the Federalists, if you remember, is Mr. Hamilton. Hamilton does not like Jefferson, right? That's why we're doing this whole Janus figure of the two guys. However, he will tell everyone to vote for Jefferson over Burr because he says that Jefferson, I might not agree with him, but at least he has standards. And this is how Jefferson will win the presidency, and then Burr will be his vice president. Later on, in a few years, Hamilton will be killed in a duel by Mr. Burr. They didn't like each other either. Hamilton seems like he doesn't like a lot of people, right? There is another song here, The Election of 1800, right, where they talk about this idea of the tie, all right? To fix that problem, all right, I'm almost done here. To fix that problem, we're going to pass the 12th Amendment that says you're voting for your president and vice president together. All right, so we're not going to have that first place, second place business. And this election is called the Revolution of 1800 because it's the first time we have a peaceful transfer of power between parties. And that's revolutionary. We don't have a war. We don't have any of this chaos happening. So our last thing is Jefferson will then become the next president. All right, okay, his vice president will be Aaron Burr, the guy who got second place. So hopefully going through these in a video form is helpful for anybody who wasn't here in class today, and also just for review in general. All right. If you got questions, send me a message on Remind. I'll get to you right away.